What is going on, everybody? John Middlekauff, that's me. 3 and Out Podcast, that's your show. Make sure you go subscribe to wherever you listen to podcasts. 3 and Out with me, John Middlekauff. Apple, iTunes, those are the same thing. Stitcher, Spotify, wherever, we got you covered. Also, if you're watching this on the Volumes YouTube page, make sure you subscribe to the page as well. Check out a lot of content. Obviously, the NFL, I got you covered. Colin's got you covered. Darius Slay, Richard Sherman, Jordan Poyer. A lot of football people around here. We consider ourselves a football network. We got you, and I'm going to dive into a lot of football right now. Okay, before we dive into some of the Saturday night games, I love this time of year, the holidays, when college football, right after that Army-Navy game the following week, the NFL starts infringing on other people's territory. They start going Saturdays for back-to-back weeks. And it's awesome. You get NFL games, and even this time of the year, you get the bowl games. You'll just be sitting there Saturday afternoon after you do some honeydews or go shopping for Christmas or Hanukkah, and you'll have multiple football games on. Pro games, college games, best time of year. You just got football left and right. You just get inundated with football. Love it. Before we dive into a couple games that I find pretty interesting on Saturday, Tom Brady, Michael Silver wrote, he used to be of NFL Network. He actually lives in Davis, California, where I'm born and raised. When I first got into quote unquote the media business, I don't consider myself a media member, but when I was in radio, I guess I was much closer to that. I met Silver in Davis. We got some beers. Mike's been really cool to me. He now has a podcast here on the Volume, and he's tied in. When I worked for the Eagles, I remember meeting Mike Silver on the sideline, and he got my number, and he picked my brain. This is when he was at Yahoo for some articles that he wrote. He knows everybody in the NFL. Like, there are certain people, certain reporters that you go, where's this guy getting it from? I know for a fact Mike Silver's talking to people. So when he writes stuff, there are certain reporters when they write stuff that it's not even just fact. It's like they're getting it from sources on the inside. And I've always gravitated toward people that like have sources on the inside. If all you do is talk to agents, like, you're going to be skewed. But if you can talk to agents, if you can talk to head coaches, if you can talk to GMs, if you can talk to prominent players, you kind of know what's going on, And Michael Silver knows a lot more people in the National Football League than myself, right? Than a lot of people that talk about football and that quote unquote are connected. So when he writes or says something, I usually take it as fact. And he reported this week. He writes now for the San Francisco Chronicle, as well as obviously doing an open mic here on the Volume Podcast Network, that Tom Brady holds like special meetings with the skill guys on Saturday nights, the day before the game, where he kind of goes over the game plan and make tweaks, which is not abnormal if coaches were to be present, right? You've heard, if you've followed football, if you've ever played football, a lot of tweaks are made the night before a game with an offensive coordinator and a coach. I mean, for years, coaches have talked about after wins. Well, last night, me and Drew Brees, Ben Roethlisberger, Peyton Manning saw something that we liked. We threw something off each other in a hotel room, in a ballroom, wherever they're staying, right? Or at dinner. And we're like, yeah, we actually like that. Let's add that to the game plan. The equivalent, especially in the NFL, of like drawing it up in the dirt. You do it the night before because you've been tweaking stuff all week long. And so it's not abnormal at all. The problem was with this report, it was no coaches were involved. And basically Todd Bowles and Byron Leftwich would find out on the fly. And I remember hearing stories when I was in the NFL, how when Peyton Manning would walk out to practice when he was with the Colts, they would hand him the script. Like every practice in football is scripted, right? All the plays for all the periods, especially anything with either team, past individual, anything with the group or the team, it's scripted by the coaches, and players have input depending on the operation. And Peyton Manning would ask for the script. He would get a red pen and he would make tweaks to it before practice even started. This was stuff of legend. And then obviously when he went to the Broncos, they had to like move quality control assistants to Peyton Manning. That's the way it goes. Like Drew Brees, Peyton Manning, Tom Brady, they get to have a lot of influence. Welcome to Aaron Rodgers. That's the way the highest level of football works. Now, the coaches not being involved, let's face it, would be a little weird. And I think when you watch Tom Brady play, it feels like an operation where not everyone is on the same page. So I definitely think there's validity to this report because when Mike Silver throws something out there, he knows. Like he's not making this up. He knows the guys associated with this operation, from Todd Bowles to Byron Leftwich to Tom. So Tom was asked about it this week and was not happy. And basically just like, next question, that's crazy talk, where it's like, Tom, I'm watching you play, and it feels like nobody is on the same page. And I've said this for a while. Some coaches are meant to be number twos. And I'm going to keep hammering this home. The best part about being the number two in the NFL, pays $2 or $3 million. Hell, Josh McDaniels was the number two in New England and was making $5 million. Todd Bowles last year as the defensive coordinator for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers was making like $3.5 million. And Bruce Arians, well, is he the most buttoned up coach of all time? Of course not. No one would, put him like next to Bill Walsh and Bill Belichick in terms of the details, but he's pretty fucking good. And there is a standard and a level of accountability that just operates under him, right? And clearly with Todd Bowles and now Byron Leftwich, I'm not saying Tom Brady's gone rogue, but it does kind of look like that. And I don't necessarily even blame Tom Brady. Maybe he doesn't believe in these guys, but it's been a disaster. And I love the Bengals this week. I think Tampa stinks. And really over the last two games against the Saints and against the 49ers, if you remove those final two drives of that Monday Night Football game, Tampa has been arguably the worst team in the league. They have been unwatchable on offense. Tom's been terrible. The offensive line's been terrible. The whole operation has been, it's been up and down, obviously, all year long. But I think the last 2 weeks have been a borderline joke. Now, Tom pulled those plays out of his ass on Monday Night Football and had the game-winning drive. But you remove those last two drives of that game, that entire game and that entire 49er game, that's like a 3-win team if you were just watching, right? You didn't know who was who. You'd be like, is this the worst team in football? So the Bengals, who have been playing some of the best football in the league. And here's the thing. Even though if you watch Tampa, they're clearly not as good. Their record's not as good as it has been in years past. They still get Tom Brady. They still got good players on defense. To me, it's an easy average team for good teams to get up for. You saw it last week with the Niners. I think you'll see it this week with Cincinnati. I still think they're going to end up winning the division. But I think Tampa is going nowhere fast. And the conversation to Tom, my recommendation, the more and more, I do think he should walk away. This is how most great all-timers go out. It's usually pretty ugly. Most guys are not John Elway and go out on top. Even Peyton Manning, who went out on top, that year was pretty rough, Remember, he missed several games with Osweiler. He couldn't throw it. That's not necessarily the case with Brady, but he clearly doesn't look like he used to look. And you can say, well, it's the offensive line. Yeah, it is what it is. I mean, he's 45 years old. The father time is undefeated. People are going to say that forever because it's true. There is no beating that. And he clearly has beat it much longer than most people, but it does feel like it's coming to a screeching halt. And then on some of these Saturday night games, what I like about the NFL is when they kind of flex their muscle, they give college their space. And part of that's probably the networks do big deals, right? CBS is in bed with the SEC. It's going to change to ABC, and ABC is in bed with, the Big 10 and the Big 12, and they're all ESPN with them all. So everyone's benefiting, right? It's not like the NFL, it makes sense for them just to own Sunday and Monday night and Thursday night. But, if they wanted to throw a couple games throughout the fall on Saturdays, they easily could, and it would be the highest rated game. But they don't. And it clearly works out for everything. But the moment that Army-Navy game ends, they go, Saturday, we're coming. And this year with Christmas falling on Sunday, they say, Christmas, we're coming too. Adam Silver, we are going to destroy your ratings. And you put them on Saturday, some of us have stuff to do, right? Shopping, haven't really shopped at all. I don't know about you. And even I've been looking online, I'm I don't even know what to get. It's almost Christmas. I'm screwed. I mean, rinse, wash, repeat every single year. I just want to watch football, right? That's all I want to do, even though these games stink. But the one thing cool I think about this Saturday is there are a couple gut check moments for a couple teams. And starting with the morning game, Minnesota's been weird. Every time I've watched them on television this year, if you listen to people that talk about football, and if you listen to people that gamble on football and the analytical people, everyone's hated them. They think they're overrated. They think they've won all these one-score games. The gambling, look at their lines. Last week's a great example. They're 10-2 playing the Lions, who were 5-7, and the Lions were favored. It's like, and the Lions covered, so it's not like they were even wrong. But when I watch Minnesota, I go, I love Dalvin Cook. I love Madison. Justin Jefferson's, might be pound for pound, non-quarterback, as good of a player as we have in the NFL. Cousins been solid. Thielen came alive last week. Like, I think they're better than all the hatred, even though, don't love their corners. They don't get a pass rush. I get where their record as a 10-3 team, they're probably closer to being 8-5. Does that number add up? 8-5. Yeah, 8-5. To me, they look more like an 8, but they're a legitimate playoff team. And because of their division, they would have won at 8-5 too, right? If they got to 10-7, 10-7 would have won the NFC North. But when everyone's kind of talking shit about you, you just get beat by the Lions, and now you're playing the Colts, whose head coach is Jeff Saturday, who claimed, I don't know if you saw the video, I think there's an owners meetings or something, because Jim Irsay in a golf cart ripping a dart, just puffing a cigarette, talking about his coaching staff, and he loves Saturday, but they're going to interview a bunch of people. I mean, that franchise right now has got some issues, and you would say they're 10-3 team against Jeff Saturday-led Colts at home. What's the line? You'd be like, at minimum 7 to 8 points. It's 4. Vegas doesn't even respect Minnesota. So everyone's going to be watching this bad boy. To me, this is kind of a gut check game for Minnesota. I'm recording this before, obviously, the 49er game. But, the Niners, they by no means have the number 2 seed just locked up. So they still need to play good football. I think a lot of people, regardless how the seeding plays out, are probably going to bet against Minnesota in that first game. Not necessarily myself, depending on the matchup. But, this is a game as a squad. This isn't like a Kirk Cousins take. This is the team. The team's clearly pretty solid. They're definitely should be better than Indianapolis. You win this game. You don't just lose and then play the Colts and lose again. Then I'd start being out on you. I'm like, yeah, no chance this team's winning a playoff game. And the other team that needs a big gut check, not necessarily the team, because Tyreek Hill brings it. Jalen Waddle has brought it. I saw Jalen Phillips is banged up, but I think he's been really good. I like how hard when you watch Miami they play. But Tua, as someone sent me a meme of Tua, and it said Tua turned the ball over. That they put that on his the back of his name on his jersey. Tua's been terrible for 2 weeks, atrociously bad. If he had played like that all season long, they'd be a 3 or 4 win team. And everyone's shitting on him because most people, including myself, weren't that big on him to begin with. So when he's balling, kind of shuts us up. But the moment he looks, worse than pedestrian, below average, everyone kind of starts kicking him when he's down. And I've been saying this from a couple weeks ago where they got to get some of these wins against the Chargers and the Niners because all of a sudden they're going on the road to Buffalo. And then in 2 weeks, they're going on the road to New England. And then next week, they're playing the Packers. These games could turn out to be very, very difficult. And 2 of them are going to be in the weather. And I know Tua said, well, it snows in Alabama too. Yeah, I'd say Buffalo's a little bit different animal. Same thing with Foxborough. I don't think anyone's comparing that to Tuscaloosa in the winter. And last time I checked, when I watched the SEC play, not many snow games, especially to Alabama. So the division they play in, Alabama, LSU, right, the Mississippis, Auburn, that's not a big I wouldn't compare that to the AFC East. And clearly playing in Miami is pretty good weather. And hell, we just saw in the last 2 weeks, Santa Clara and when they played in Los Angeles in a dome, even though it's kind of it's not completely a dome. There's still air going through so the wind can blow a little bit, but it's fucking LA. And he looked this is a big, big moment for the guy. It's by far, you could argue it's the biggest game of the weekend. We can get into the Jets and Lions as well. But he's got to play well. Now, I don't know if their team, he could play well and they could still lose. But we could have a moment where he loses this game, then he loses to New England a couple weeks. Maybe the Packers beat him. We start talking about his future on the franchise kind of all over again. It felt like just because he was 19-3 and they were whatever 8-1 or 9-2, whatever the hell their record was before the Niner game, everyone just put them on a pedestal. They found their franchise quarterback. It's guys, it wasn't that long ago that they were doing everything humanly possible to get Tom Brady, to get Deshaun Watson, and get rid of Tua Tagovailoa. So to just think in 3 months and, not 10, 11 games that he had just solidified himself, that's not the way the NFL works. And never forget, Mike McDaniel was not the guy They drafted him. Now, the owner, I don't think the owner's been the biggest fan. Now, the general manager might be, but Mike McDaniel's already kind of earned a lot of credit because he's proven to be a pretty good offensive mind. And who's to say that he's all in and Tua's just on scholarship in his book? So I would say that Tua, not only is Saturday night a gut check game, this final stretch is a gut check game, or gut check stretch for Tua. Can he play outside? How does he do in these big games against better opponents? Clearly, these last 2 weeks have not gone well. I'm fascinated to watch it play out. I personally would bet against him. I think it could get pretty ugly for Miami. I think Miami could absolutely implode. And then this discussion, after the season in February and March, we're talking, is Miami in the quarterback business? Do they look to sign a veteran? Do they look to make a trade? Because for as great as Tua's start was, it can unravel fast in the NFL. Before we dive into some other stuff coming up this weekend, I wanted to tell you about my friends at Omaha Steaks. Omaha Steaks have been sending me stuff for years. I love their product. The holidays are here. What better way for a gift to send people meat, to order meat on your own and bring it over? Omaha Steaks has put together a delicious selection of various gift packages to make shopping for the ones you love nice and easy. Go to omahasteaks.com and take advantage of 50% off site-wide. Plus, use the code the number 3 and out at checkout to get an additional 40% off. That's a lot of percentages off. I highly recommend it. You can get butcher cut filet mignon. You can get air chilled boneless chicken. Love that. Ultra juicy burgers, and even easy to prepare comfort meals that are ready in a flash. Cannot recommend my friends at Omaha Steaks enough. Omaha Steaks is a gift from the heart, a gift that will be remembered with every unforgettable bite. Order with complete confidence today, knowing you're ordering the very best. Visit omahasteaks.com. Take advantage of 50% off site-wide, plus use the promo code number 3 and out at checkout to get that extra 40% off your order. Minimum order may be required. Okay. The Packers, who have been absolute behemoth the last several years, have cruised to, they've been the number 1 seed the last 2 years. And 3 years ago, they were in the NFC Championship game against the 49ers. So they won 39 games over that period of time. This year, we've well discussed, been the season from hell. Rodgers' thumb was messed up. And clearly, Christian Watson did not pop soon enough. The defense has been more than questionable. They have had their issues. And they're playing the Rams this week, who I think are going to come to a screeching halt after that miraculous Baker Mayfield, 2 drives against the Raiders. But you don't get to play the Raiders every week, right? The Patriots do this week, and I love the Patriots. But what I think is cool about the Packers and really Aaron Rodgers over this last 3 or 4 game stretch is they kind of get to play spoiler. They have nothing to lose. Their season has sucked. They're not going to the playoffs. Even if they ran the table, I still would highly doubt they would make it. I guess they get to 9-8, but I don't know if 9 gets in. And they have a stretch where in 2 weeks they play at Miami, then they play Minnesota, and then they play the Lions, who, if the Lions beat the Jets this weekend, there's a path for them to get to 10 wins. Obviously, that game would be huge at the end of the season. But unlike in previous years, it's not like Green Bay is going to be resting anyone. And we know they don't like Minnesota, and that game's in Green Bay, so the weather with Kirk Cousins, everyone's going to be keeping an eye on that. I think this is a moment where everyone just kind of gets to relax. It feels like the Packers were tight early in the season. And now Rodgers coming off a bye, get a little healthy, and just kind of let it rip. And I think that's what you're going to get. Now, this week withstanding, playing the Rams, who, are rolling out a practice squad group. I'm not talking about that game. I'm talking about those last 3. And like we talked about with Tua, it's kind of time to put up or shut up. No one cares how many plays you make in early October. You get paid the big bucks to lead me to the playoffs and then play well in January, right? And I think all the pressure is going to be on him in that game. He's playing Aaron Rodgers. And the following week, Kirk Cousins, everyone's kind of anointed him, this team. Even though, like I've said, I think he's played really well this season. Even though when you look at his numbers, they parallel Jared Goff's. Like Jared Goff and Kirk Cousins this year are kind of the same player. And Rodgers gets a chance to play them all. And I'll tell you this, if Rodgers is much healthier than he's been, I think the Packers are going to be very, very tough. Speaking about the big game this weekend, Jets and Lions. In what world, if I would have told you like September 1st, the week before Christmas, there is a massive game on Sunday, you'd have been like, oh, Rams, Packers, Patriots, Raiders. Like, no, Lions, Jets. Like, what? I'm like, yeah, two playoff teams going at it. And I've said this for a while now. Jared Goff, when you've seen him with McVay when they had really good teams, and then this year when they have obviously a really good nucleus of players around him, he can be really good. He can play that Kirk Cousin-like role. And I've said over and over, I would be hesitant to take a quarterback if I was the Lions with that Rams pick, which has a chance to be the number 2 overall pick. Probably more than likely be somewhere 3, 4, 5, but it's going to be in that range. There's a chance. Look at the Rams schedule. They might not win another game. The Lions have that pick. That I don't know if the Lions have to force a quarterback right there. I do think that they could be open to rolling it back with Jared Goff, take a Will Anderson or take the guy from the pass rusher from Georgia, and then with your own pick, take another player and just build up a really sweet team and just roll with Jared Goff. I think that has to be on the table. But the only way you feel good about doing that is if Jared Goff plays well outside. Because most seasons, as the Lions quarterback, you're going to play division games late in the season. And last time I checked, the Chicago Bears and Green Bay Packers play in inclement weather. And Jared Goff has a chance, because the knock on Jared Goff, going back since college, when he was at Cal, when they went up to Oregon in a driving rainstorm, he couldn't grip the ball, because one of the knocks on Goff is he doesn't have big hands. Well, they're playing the Jets this weekend. I'm sure it's not going to be sunny and 70. And then at the end of the season, they play the Packers in Green Bay. So he gets multiple shots in inclement weather games to kind of prove that, like, the Jared Goff we've been seeing in some of these dome games translates to outside. Hell, he doesn't even need to be as good as he's been. As long as he can just lead the team and not screw it up, you feel pretty good about it. And I'm not saying that they won't end up taking a quarterback, because I could see Dan Campbell loving Will Levis. Big, strapping guy, huge arm. Like, feels like Will Levis is Dan Campbell's type guy. But I think if Jared Goff can prove himself, like, Jared Goff can do more than Mike White. Like, ultimately, Mike White, all he's doing is proving that he's like a serviceable player to the Jets. No one in their right mind is going, you know what? Mike White could be a 5-year starter. One thing Jared Goff has proven, he was the number 1 overall pick in the draft. He started basically every game that he's been healthy for the last, 8 years, however long he's been in the NFL. And he's been on teams that have won playoff games and been to the Super Bowl. Like, we have seen him have success in big moments. It translates. Now, a lot of those moments have been in LA in good weather. And remember, the NFC Championship game that they won was in a dome. So it's clear where he benefits from playing, and that's in good weather. He's a good weather quarterback. I think Derek Carr is very similar to Jared Goff that way. I would not love him in Chicago. I would not love him in New England. I would not love him with the Jets. But if you can prove that just like you can function in that for short, because ultimately you're only going to play so many games, in December in those spots on a given year when you play for the Lions, like, you still get 8 to 9 dome games. So that value is really positive if you're playing well. But if he's improved or just shows that he's better, which I'm not saying that he is, like, I would struggle to pick the Lions this week against the Jets strictly because I do not trust him in a cold, windy, potentially wet game. I don't like that at all. But he can shut me up quick, just like he can kind of prove to himself. Because the thing about the NFL, you're constantly trying to earn a spot or keep your spot. Like, it's the ultimate, like, beside a couple players in this league that are on massive contracts like Kyler Murray and Russell Wilson, the overwhelming majority of players are fighting for their jobs on a yearly basis and can get cut at the moment's notice, because you're just always, that's the way front offices operate. We're always talking about how can we upgrade this position. And the majority of NFL contracts, let's face it, are year to year, and at most like every 2 years. So even if you have like a guaranteed deal that kind of puts you on scholarship for a couple years, doesn't mean going into year 2, I don't draft a guy that's ultimately going to replace you. And you can prove front offices and the coaching staff wrong. And I'm not saying, like, clearly the Lions believed in Jared Goff, I would say more than most of us last year when they made this trade. Because remember, they got crushed, I thought, as part of like, wait, you just took back Jared Goff? Why would you want Jared Goff? And remember, they were adamant, like, we kind of like him. And the GM, Brad Holmes, who had been with him with the Rams, and clearly Dan Campbell, like, he's earned some of his respect. So I can't wait to watch that game. And then kind of a weird story. Obviously, it's been confirmed Kyler Murray tore his ACL, is out for the season. And like I said on Monday night, when you tear your ACL December 12th, Odell Beckham tore his ACL last year in the Super Bowl. And he can't get cleared right now to play NFL football. And in about another month, that's going on 11 months. Like this notion that everyone's Adrian Peterson and going to bounce right back and be able to play immediately after an ACL is just consistently proven he's an all-time outlier. Most guys take 10 to 12 months. And especially Odell Beckham, explosive wide receiver. Kyler Murray, explosive runner. Like, there's a very good chance Kyler Murray doesn't play a snap next year because, let's face it, Cardinals ain't going to be a playoff team. The news that came out, think about this season for them. Their running back coach was immediately suspended and then basically fired for domestic violence over the summer. Their offensive line coach, when they went to Mexico, did something weird with a chick and got fired immediately. Their quarterback, who they gave an enormous contract, now has a torn ACL, and their general manager is fighting some undisclosed illness and is just taking a leave of absence, is just gone. And his duties will be split up by a couple guys that are already in the front office. And listen, I don't have any inside information or know anything about him. And the Cardinals were adamant, like, it's HIPAA or whatever. We don't have to say. And listen, it's not our right to know if he's battling some sick. I hope the guy's okay. But it did hit me. Is this the last time we ever see Steve Keim as the general manager for the Arizona Cardinals? Like, does he ever come back and take back over power? Is this, in a weird way, an out for Bidwell? You fire Kingsbury, Keim just stays away sick, and then you just kind of phase him out and you just start anew. And you do have to wonder that, is their job appealing, given that Kyler Murray not only will miss next season, but if you go type in Kyler Murray's contract and go to Spot Track, the website that kind of breaks it down by year, he's basically on the team starting in 23, at minimum 23, 24, 25. And then even 26, the dead number is relatively big. So, like, you're talking, it was an extension. It kicks in on the books starting next year. I think this is a very, very complicated situation. This is a franchise in a weird way that does have some pieces, like love Budda Baker. Obviously, Hopkins is a monster. Kyler's a very interesting player. Isaiah Simmons, depending on who you ask. You watch some games, he looks good. Some games, you don't really notice. But this is a franchise going nowhere fast. Now their star would be strong. I mean, their highly paid quarterback is going to be MIA for a long time. Their general manager's on leave. This is a team that might probably going to end up 5-12. What a season, man. What a year after. What did they start last year? 8-0. It looked like they were going to win the division. Any team, like a lot of shitty teams over the years, have a one-off season. When you look at their body of work, they've been bad. And they continue to be bad, and I think they will be bad moving forward unless they basically hit the nuclear option, and that's blow the thing up. And I said this the other day, I do believe that's what they should do. Before we die, a couple things on Mike Leach is some of these guys are opting out. And my take on the opt-out is pretty simple. One, if you're playing for the playoffs, I don't know how you would work all season long and then have the chance at a national championship and opt out. Now, I haven't seen anyone on any of the four teams opting out. I don't count Smith and Jigba because he hasn't played all season long. But it does feel like the rest of the crew is all playing on Georgia, Ohio State, Michigan, and TCU, right? As they should. Like, what was the point of risking it all season? Now, any other bowl game, if to me you are a top 50, you could even go as far as top 75 lock. Like, if the NFL general managers and coaches, not the agents, but NFL GMs and coaches, and the surveys you're going through, talking to people in the league, and they say, listen, you are going to get drafted in the top couple rounds. Completely understand it. But to me, if you're a fringe third-round pick or you're a third-day pick and you are taking off the bowl game, I think that's a mistake. Because, one, you can earn credit in the bowl game by making plays and looking good. And usually when you go up against these other opponents, you're playing other good teams, typically that have other NFL players. And I think so many guys that opt out, like if you're opting out and you're a 5th-round pick, like you're getting terrible advice. It is not smart. It honestly doesn't make any sense, because not only can you earn credit by playing, like you earn money. Like, how do you improve your draft stock? By playing football. Now, you obviously can help yourself out with a good combine, but to me, the tape and playing on games is where you get ranked initially on a draft board. And the good teams, for the most part, aren't making too many crazy tweaks based on the combine and the pro days. So I think some of these guys are getting terrible advice. Now, I also understand, like, a lot of these bowl games are completely meaningless. Like, you could argue every bowl game beside the 2 playoff games are meaningless. And I tend to agree. Ultimately, it doesn't mean anything, except like that's the resume as a player. Like, your resume as a player is how you operate character-wise, how you treat people, your coaches, how coachable you are, all the intangible stuff. And then the tape, right? And the tape is really what separates guys. And I think a lot of people have a false sense of kind of where they stand. And, it's obviously on an individual basis. Like, you're the 2nd tight end in the class. No shit. Why are you playing in the Meineke Care Car Nike Bowl? Doesn't make any sense. But it's like, hey, bro, you're going to be a 6th rounder and you're just not playing. If I think some of these front offices would be like, did you just not want to play football? Did you not like the team? Like, you just leaving your teammates? Like, what's going on here? I think there are fair questions to ask when some of these guys opt out that are not, first 2-day draft picks. And last but not least, I talked about Mike Leach the other day, but like everyone, you read all these articles, been thinking a lot about him. I don't think there's anything that's a bigger compliment to any human being than being called an overachiever. And I remember Kobe Bryant, one time they asked him like how he wanted to be remembered, and he wanted to be remembered as an overachiever. And when you think about it, like, this is a guy that won 5 titles and was one of the best players of all time. But like, when you think Kobe Bryant, Tom Brady, Tiger Woods, like, the number one thing you think about with some of these guys, like, God, these guys were relentless workers. They maximized every ounce of talent. Like, some of those guys would have been, especially Kobe or Tiger, their floor was so high, but they maximized their ceiling by just scratching and clawing to the top. And when you think about Mike Leach, the thing I can't get over is the 3 programs in which he coached were all borderline cellar dwellers in their conferences, yet he won at all of them. Like, part of when you win at Washington State, when you win at Texas Tech, when you go 8-4 at Mississippi State, which is the worst team in that division, you're an overachiever. And I think sometimes intellectual people, and that's what Leach was, right? He was really intellectual, is you don't think of them necessarily as like grinders, even though, I mean, clearly is the case for some, but like crazy overachievers. Like, usually the overachievers are guys that aren't smart, right? Like, I have to work really hard. I'm not as intellectually brilliant as a lot of people. Like, I can't think of some of the shit that Coward thinks of, right? So I got to read articles, watch all these games. Like, I can't really skip steps. And what made Mike Leach kind of cool is he was this brilliant intellectual lawyer that didn't play football and was known as not like even the biggest grinder, like in recruiting, yet his teams always overachieved. It's kind of a crazy conundrum. It shows you how brilliant the guy was. And so anytime that you're called an overachiever, like, that's in my book, that's one of the best compliments you can get. And the other thing is, like, when you're an innovator in, a highly competitive, highly paid industry, that's very, very difficult to do, right? There really aren't that many innovators when you really think about football. There are a lot of good football coaches, but are they quote unquote innovators? And the impact Mike Leach had with his offense, and maybe I mentioned this the other day, I don't know. Sorry, I got short-term memory loss over the years. When I played high school football in 2000, I guess it would have been the fall of 2002 would have been my last year playing high school football. So 20 years ago, I would say the majority of programs in like the Northern California area ran just like a heavy run game oriented, program. Triple option, the wing tee. It looked like Navy and Army. And I think when you went around the country, especially up until like the late 90s, most college programs high school programs were run first. I think when you look around now, everyone's spreading it out and throwing it. Not obviously every single school, but the majority of high school programs throw the football. And obviously in college, the majority of college programs throw the ball and run versions of a spread offense passing attack. And the influence that he specifically had on that is beyond immense. Now, he learned it from other people, Hal Mumme, who, was ahead of his time. But I think Mike Leach taking that and the time of the internet and making it so easy to see everything, obviously so many college games on television. So by the mid-2000s, we could see Texas Tech on TV. That played a huge role in people able to steal his stuff. Technology is the ability to get college film if you're a high school coach in Florida or Seattle or wherever. But imagine being basically known as an overachiever and an innovator. I mean, what a special legacy Mike Leach left. I'm trying to think of like all the unique coaches just over the last like couple decades. He's got to be, on the short list of most memorable. There are a lot of even solid coaches. Like ultimately, Sean Payton's really impressive, and him and Drew Brees is a Super Bowl champion. But like, I actually think like Mike Leach, there's like a level of emotion when you just bring up his name. You're just talking about him in a conversation. Like everyone had an opinion on the guy. He was just different than Pete Carroll, Sean Payton, Saban, Brian Kelly. He just had nothing in common with most of these guys. And he was damn good. And he won at programs that really had no business winning. So, RIP. And like I said the other day, football lost to Behemoth.